Kelly Wallace, and I'm the California History Librarian at the Los Angeles Public Library. Welcome to the third installment of LA Untangled, our ongoing conversation series with people who engage in LA history in interesting and unique ways. Today, I'm very fortunate to be joined by Eric Brightwell, self-described rambler, explorer, writer, and mapmaker. He has written for Angels Walk LA, Boom, a Journal of California, KCET Departures, as well as Amoeblog and Hidden Los Angeles. He has been featured in the Los Angeles Times, Huffington Post, LAist, and others. His maps and artwork have been in several exhibitions in local art galleries. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
First off, I want to talk a little bit about how you ended up in Los Angeles. I read that after you made your first visit to LA, you decided to move here. And so I was curious what struck you about Los Angeles on that visit.
I was struck by how different it was from what I had expected it to be, based on Hollywood depictions and celebrity news and this and that, the mainstream depictions. I thought this is a place, I didn't think that I would really enjoy it. And I came out here on a very long circuitous road trip, and this was just going to be one stop for me. But I thought, I lived in a Florida suburb. I was like, I don't care about palm trees or beaches that much. But I came out here and it was just, it was so different from what I expected. I had a friend that lived in Monterey Park, which I had never heard anything about the San Gabriel Valley, and I thought this is fascinating. And then two other friends lived in the Inland Empire, and a couple other friends lived in Santa Monica. So I was going back and forth, just going on surface streets. My car broke down in Boyle Heights, and I just thought, well, there's so much more going on here than I was led to believe.
That's fantastic. So after you moved here, you decided to start exploring the city, or how did that come about?
So it really started with a friend of mine lived in Echo Park. She lived right next to Elysian Park, and I think this is the beginning of it. We would go hiking in Elysian Park almost every day, and we would always do the same route because she didn't want to get lost, and she knew the one trail that she knew in and out. And I could see that it's a pretty big park and that there are these other areas and there were trails going off, and I wanted to explore, but we looked online. There were no maps online. There were no maps inside of the park showing any of the trails. So I just started making my own map of Elysian Park by exploring down a trail we hadn't gone down, and then I would figure out, oh, this trail connects to that one, and slowly fill it in. So that's how it kind of began, yeah.
Out of necessity. But you also have been making maps of places you've explored since you were a little kid.
Yeah. I think the first one I made would have been in fourth grade. I had a fourth grade teacher, who wanted us to do fantasy maps. And my mom had the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit books, and they all have maps in the beginning that I used to just look at the maps for years before I read them. I was just like, I was just fixated on the maps. And then, maps are still such a thing in like fantasy literature. There's always like that you start with a map, and then I would play computer games where you would have to kind of make a map to get around, because a lot of text only games back in the early 80s. And I started, exploring I remember I made a map of the property around our house, and kind of invested magical qualities to some of the things, I remember like a big tree fell down in a storm, and that became like a shipwreck, and, so I started making these little fantasy maps.
All right. Well, let's just jump right in and start looking at some of your maps of LA neighborhoods.
Maybe I'll just take some out. Flip through them if you want.
I'm going to talk about those. And see, this is what I love about maps. I mean, you've sort of talked about this already, but that maps can map whatever you want them to map. It could map the routes I walk my dog, jacaranda trees in my neighborhood or whatever. And so like this one, it says Malls of Koreatown.
Yeah.
So that's very...
Yeah, and well, that's one of the things about maps is that I think a misconception is that they're objective.
Right.
Everything about them is subjective. The scale, the subject, what you choose to include, what you
Right.
leave out. It's, I don't, sometimes I'll put in a freeway almost kind of like to just highlight like what a scar it is through the neighborhood to me. But a lot of times I'll leave them out because I mostly get around by walking or biking or taking the bus.
I was going to say, do you drive? I didn't know whether you...
I do drive. I have a delivery job that's my day job is as a delivery person, but I don't own a car, and I haven't owned a car in about 13 years or something like that, I think.
Wow.
Over 13 years.
Yeah. It's impressive in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And this is a good example. This is a map of Dayton Heights, which is a neighborhood I'm sure most people don't know exists. So,
well, the way I became aware of Dayton Heights was there's a sign on Hoover in front of an old Rexall drug that is not a Rexall drug anymore. I don't think Rexall drug exists. But the letters, it said Dayton Heights Rexall drugs. And then I saw, oh, there's Dayton Heights Elementary. What's Dayton Heights? So I started. And it felt, it's a very walkable corridor. And then from that, I wandered, because a lot of times when you get like these nice little walkable business corridors, it turns out there used to be a train that went there.
Yes.
And there was a Gold Line train or Los Angeles Railway train that went up Hoover. And so I was like, oh, that's why you have all these nice little shops here.
all right. Brings us to your process a little bit, because you walk through the neighborhood and you take in more than just the sights. They say the scents and the sounds and the people, and so all these sort of details lend flavor to your maps. So I'm a firm believer in like boots on the ground in terms of what you can find and discover.
Yeah. Well, I think the only time I ever tried to do one on a bike was Little Bangladesh, and I rode my bike through, and I didn't see anything. And I love cycling, but you're paying attention to cars more than you're paying
Yes, you have to watch out for your life. Yes.
What's going on? And then I turned around, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna walk back through, and I remember, it's not a homogeneous neighborhood. It's very diverse, but there's a lot of Korean businesses and Latino businesses, and there was a place called Asian Mart. I just kind of assumed that was probably a Korean place, but then I popped in and there's like a painting of the first Bangladeshi president, and then I noticed, even the door that goes down, it has like the Bangladeshi flag on it, and you just can't. You have to walk to see that stuff.
Right. See beyond the initial surface. And the other thing, obviously these are hand-drawn, so they're very personal, very charming, whimsical, a lot of times details like here, the banner that you've put Rowena on. But also that these are the complete antithesis or opposite of Google Maps or your Waze. And that even though those maps are very accurate, but they don't, two things, they don't capture the feel of the neighborhood or the soul of the neighborhood, and also they can't really show the boundaries, even interestingly enough, because there are no boundaries for the most part. There are some that are bounded by a freeway or a river channel, but they can't really show the boundaries of a neighborhood, which is interesting that you include these the boundaries on a lot of your maps. So I just love that, in a way, these show more than the satellite maps can.
Well, the thing about, people will point out to me, sometimes be sarcastic, say that, there is a thing called Google Maps, and you don't actually like draw a map anymore and stuff. But I guess for me, there's a couple things going on. One of them is I don't retain a sense of a place if I'm just listening to GPS tell me which way to go through there. I had a friend that lived in the Hollywood Hills, and he didn't know how to, get to the Thai place that he ate to if he didn't have his GPS. And it was because he's just listening to that, and that sense of like lack of connection with like, okay, I just point A I know is my house, and then point B is where I'm going, and then I just listen to what it tells me to do, and I don't look around, I don't engage with anything. And they're also, I think there's, coming from fantasy maps, you're not using those to navigate. You're not going to Middle Earth.
Right.
You're not trying to figure out how to get there using GPS. So it's the same kind of thing, and I like to invest them with a little bit of a fantasy aspect because I don't know, it is more fun to me to think of them that way, and particularly in Los Angeles, which is a city of so many neighborhoods. In my experience, a lot of people have very little awareness about the neighborhoods that border their neighborhoods. So I like to leave those sort of there be dragons, like I don't like keep it vague, like, oh, that's because I've had people. Well, I during the pandemic, I walked with a neighbor from Silver Lake to Los Feliz, which they're neighboring neighborhoods, but he said, I didn't know you could walk this way, and it was probably faster than driving because he told me the route he follows, and it's just going down all these major streets, and I was like, oh no, you can just walk straight up Rowena, and we'll be there in 15-20 minutes.
That's funny. He thought that was a big journey.
Yeah, his eyes when we got to the cafe that he drives to, he was like, "Oh my God, I didn't know we could walk here."
And the other another interesting thing is, and you're from not from here originally, and had a preconception of what Los Angeles was, but a lot of people think that it's this sprawl. That there's no center, or there's no heart, to Los Angeles, and that's just a lot of concrete, freeway, river channels, and everyone just drives by, and your maps sort of dispel that notion and reveal that there are all these distinctive neighborhoods in Los Angeles, each one with its own character, and so I think that's really terrific. I have a question about the borders, though, because do you ever get pushback about...
A little bit. Probably on that more than, well, even more than the borders of neighborhoods, what you include in a region, like a multi-neighborhood region, people will say, I don't think of that. I think of that as South Bay. And then someone else will say, well, that's not South Bay. South Bay is only because those aren't formal things.
Exactly.
And people will argue and insist that they are.
There's no city amendment
we don't
that
have any
declares
wards.
These are the borders of.
We don't have boroughs, so people will argue about, is Glendale in the San Fernando Valley or not?
Oh my God. Years ago, when they first had like online ticket ordering, and I was trying to order tickets for a movie theater in Pasadena, and I couldn't find the movie theater on the ticket thing, and I was like, I don't understand what's going on. And then finally, it was like, I was in San Gabriel Valley, San Fernando Valley, it was included in the San Fernando Valley. I'm like, who put this thing together? Oh my God.
I remember the LA Weekly, they would have the breakdown of events, and for them, they had South Bay was going all the way to like Whittier and stuff, like places that are bordering other counties, and I was like, but it refers to the southern portion of the Santa Monica Bay. Like, it's a very specific, you can kind of go out from that, but I was like, I would never think what's going on in Whittier, I'm in the South Bay.
Yes.
But,
yeah, it's true.
They don't match up exactly. But the neighborhood, the boundaries, I sometimes get some pushback because even, that's not that formal. Sometimes neighborhood councils and stuff will formally change their boundaries, which usually because they think, oh, this neighborhood has negative connotations. I'll just not to pick on one in particular, but Van Nuys, they're constant. It's like, oh, well, we're going to call this part of Van Nuys Sherman Oaks now. Because Sherman Oaks is more fashionable.
North
or
Hills.
Has lower, right, or Canoga Park splitting off. 80% of Canoga Park has been whittled away to be West Hills or Winnetka. And it started as Owens Mouth. And but nothing, you could have lived there and never moved and been like, well, I lived in Owens Mouth, and then I lived in Canoga Park, and then I lived in West Hills, and like never left your house. So all of the constant changing and balkanization is kind of amusing to me.
Well, that brings us to another big project of yours, because you have created a map of all of the Los Angeles neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. So how long did that take? And I'm assuming that idea came to you just from dealing with everything that we've been talking about?
Yeah. Well, two things. I'm still kind of working on it because there are constantly little places in the Sierra Pelona and in Antelope Valley that are still in Los Angeles County, and then I'll see it on another map or an old, and then there is like a little place there. I think one of the recent ones, a buddy and I think we went up to Lake Hughes to go to the Rock Inn or something, and then we came to this place called 3 Points, and I was like, I knew that wasn't on my map. I was like, we got to put 3 Points on my map. So I'm always adding it. At some point,
It's a work in progress.
I'm gonna have to go back
Constantly.
and like do it all over. But the other thing is with the big map. One of the things I wanted to do is one of the things that really struck me when I first came out here was the Channel Islands, because you can see islands off the coast, and all of my friends that grew up here acted like that wasn't a big deal. They're like, there's nothing to do out there. Oh, there's like Catalina, it's boring. And I just
Well, I have to admit, I have to confess, I've never been to Catalina.
but
I
I
was
think
born
most
here.
people,
So.
yeah, I think that's common of so many people, and I just thought I'm just fascinated by islands. I was just like, I gotta get out there. So, and people don't even think of Catalina as one of the Channel Islands, but it is.
Yeah.
It's not part of the park system, but there's also San Clemente, which is like the size of San Francisco. But that's not even. I don't know if I've ever seen that on a map of Los Angeles County. It's usually just the mainland, and then maybe Catalina in a little box, sort of the way you get mainland U.S. and then you get a little tiny Alaska and a tiny Hawaii, or a Hawaii that's been moved way over. And so I wanted to do a map that was. One of the things I like to do, like, is with the transit maps and stuff, is to actually do the routes where they go, because it is one thing to look at like a transit map and you want clarity. You're trying to figure out how to get somewhere on a train, but you don't have a sense of what neighborhoods you go through in that. So if you see like the actual route mapped out, it tells a different story. And if you see where the Channel Islands are that are part of Los Angeles County, San Clemente Island and Santa Catalina, you see how much water there is, and that it just really foregrounds that the oceanic maritime qualities of this that I feel like kind of get slept on.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's was part. And so when I was trying to figure out like how big is this map going to have to be to actually have Catalina and San Clemente where they are in relation to the mainland, and also like big enough that I can make the smallest neighborhoods and write them with my micro pen. And it's like floor to ceiling, so it's like an 8-foot tall map.
Oh, it is?
Yeah,
Really?
it's really big, yeah.
Oh, I've only seen
obviously
it
needs to be
online, so,
bigger,
oh my
because
goodness.
There's some,
Wow.
there's these tiny new little neighborhoods where I'm like, oh, I can't write that small. And I practiced. I can write on a grain of rice, but it's like these neighborhoods, some of them are so tiny.
Oh, that's interesting. And the one other, someone in here was ethnic neighborhoods, ethnic enclaves. Are very fascinating. Obviously, it's a big part of Los Angeles, very diverse. An ethnic neighborhood enclave can be a lot of things. It can be sort of a tourist attraction, or a shopping corridor, or residential. And but you've mapped a lot of ethnic enclaves, and so I was just wondering what your thoughts are about those, how they come about.
I mean, but that's one of the things I didn't really know about Los Angeles before I came here, because I don't think you get anything like any real sense of the diversity of Los Angeles from Hollywood movies or television. If you went by that, I think if you asked most people that had never been to Los Angeles, who only watched movies and TV, what do you think the demographic breakdown is of Los Angeles? I think they would probably think, oh, it's probably 80% white and maybe like 15% Latino and 5% black, but it would be completely wrong.
It's so true.
When I went to Taiwan, I remember asking people, like, did you know that Los Angeles has the largest Taiwanese community outside of Taiwan? And no one knew that. But in Korea, everyone knows in Korea that
I was going to say that's
we have the largest Korean community outside of Korea, but I don't think necessarily people know that in the rest of the U.S. And that distinction is of so many cultures here, Thai, Taiwanese, Korean, Armenian, Filipino, Vietnamese, on and on. Like, there's so many that just get overlooked. And
yeah, in many ways.
and then sometimes they're more outward facing, like tourist oriented, like Chinatown. You know, the original Chinatown was displaced when they built the 101
Union
freeway
Station.
and Union Station. And then they said, you know, here's China City and just move over here. Almost like people as a tourist attraction. Like you go live over here, and we built these pagodas, and it's very what Hollywood idea of what a Chinese neighborhood should look like. And I mean, that has its own charm, and especially as it gets older and it acquires its own sort of authenticity. Like,
Right.
oh, this is a real 1930s Hollywood idea of a Chinese
Right.
place that
Right. It has its own
people do
charm.
live in, right? But I remember on my first visit going down Fairfax and just having the windows out. I was, you know, my friends drove everywhere, being natives, and the smells and stuff started to change. And I was like, what's this? And they're like, oh, yeah, it's like some Ethiopian neighborhood or something. I was like, stop the car, like we gotta eat and get out and walk around because I was like, I didn't know there was a little Ethiopia here, and there weren't signs for it yet.
Right.
And then I've seen some of that happen. Like there weren't signs for Little Bangladesh when I came here, and there are places that there still aren't signs for, but people talk about like Little Odessa and Little Brazil, and you don't hear them as much because they don't have any kind of official recognition. And yet you
Right.
go there and you're like, okay, there's a bunch of Brazilian restaurants.
Yeah, there's the official, and then there's, the little.
Yeah.
But that brings us to food, because food is, I think so many people associate food with these ethnic enclaves, and certainly with Little Ethiopia, as the Ethiopian restaurants, and certainly I think Koreatown, and
Yeah.
these others that you think of food. And it reminds me, I wrote down a quote from Jonathan Gold, and he goes, I write about taco stands and fancy French restaurants to try to get people less afraid of their neighbors and to live in their entire city. And so, food really has that power. But also, you mentioned Chinatown being moved, but also the ethnic enclaves that they sort of have a life cycle. As the community assimilates, then a lot of times the ethnic enclave disappears, and Little Italy here is an example of that.
And some of this is gone since I made it. Like Little Joe's was torn down.
And it was hanging on there for a long time, and we used to eat there when I was a little kid.
Well, with that, I feel like they held on to it in part just to let it be neglected, so that people every time LA Downtown News wrote about it, they always use the word eyesore, and I was like, it's an eyesore because it's closed and abandoned. Like just
Right.
it could be. I don't know. But you've still got San Antonio Winery, Lanza Brothers, East Side Deli, the Italian hall down there, and there's a few vestiges of Little Italy, and in what they officially call the Byzantine Latino Quarter, but it used to be Greek town. There's still St. Sophia's and Papa Christo's, and so I don't know if any Greek people still live in that part of Pico Union anymore, but they still have the
Right.
Greek festival there, and there's
the
still a Greek
church
church
so
and
often
a Greek
is the-
restaurant and a Greek market, so.
I had a patron a couple weeks ago, and he was researching that Greeks apparently were very involved in the agriculture in early Los Angeles, and Los Angeles used to be far more agricultural than anyone can imagine. But there really was very little information on this. And anyway, he had been to St. Sophia and then gone through the web records, and that's where he found most information about that. But
That's actually that reminds me, one of the things I want to explore that came up when I was writing about Boyle Heights for Angel Walks, that Jim's, I forget, I would mangle if I tried to do it, but Jim was a Greek immigrant, and then there's George's and Dino's and Patra's, and I started to think there are all these interesting burger joints from the 50s, 60s, early 70s that have Greek roots, and where you get, especially in Boyle Heights, I thought it was really interesting that there's pastrami left over from when it was a Jewish neighborhood, but then on the menu usually it's like a pastrami sandwich with burritos and burgers, and it's you just seeing those layers of I love the way cultures mash up in different ways, and I'm just even though I don't eat meat, I'm fascinated by these Greek root burger places that have all kinds of different food.
yeah, so that should be another project.
Yeah.
And when you mentioned that they left it to be an eyesore, it reminded me of Chinatown. We're talking about Chinatown. Well, that's partly, obviously they wanted to build the train station, but for decades before that, there was just a rumor that, they wanted to, build a train station there. And so nobody would invest in it, and landlords wouldn't invest in the building because, oh, it's going to be torn. So, of course, it became run down, and so then everything, oh, it's run down, it's a slum, it needs to be cleared. Anyway, sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
You see that all the time. I feel like that with Westlake, MacArthur Park. It's like you can tell they just don't want to invest anything into it until they just want to redevelop it. And, there's no, I mean, I love that the way they fixed up, they renovated Echo Park Lake and, but there's no boats in Lincoln Park. There's no boats in MacArthur Park, and like there used to be.
Yeah.
It's like bring them back.
I know. Yeah.
Bring them
It's
back
true.
before the people that are, for the people that have been there the whole time.
Yes, exactly. Um, is there, I mean, you've covered almost all of Los Angeles, would you say? Are there any?
No, I would say there's so much left.
So, speaking of that, I forgot, I wanted to mention, I read that you're writing a book about Los Angeles, is that right?
I'm in the process of writing, I'm trying to make something that's based, won't surprise you, very neighborhood, community oriented, and just a very like Seijo or haiku inspired, like really brief, like distill something about a neighborhood down to something really like 3 lines, and hopefully with some kind of irony, because I love all the like flat neighborhoods with heights in the name and things like that. But I wanted to, I want to just, it's a real challenge of making it short, and just because there are so many communities, even making everything have a really small description is making it really long. And of course, I'm totally inspired by Holy Land, the DJ Waldy book, which has the choice of like dates and just, I don't know, if you describe that book to people, I think sometimes it sounds like, well, that sounds incredibly boring.
Right.
And then it's like, oh, no, it's like, it's weirdly moving, and poetic,
Yes.
like about a post-war suburb and like when a mall was built or whatever. Like he just does that so well. So
Yeah,
That's
and when he describes what, in a lot of respects, you think, oh, but with such love
Right.
also for the development housing, the like 3 house designs.
yeah.
and,
The floor plans. These are your choices.
So since you are so familiar with Los Angeles and walking, I'm going to ask the question of where do you take people who are from out of town, or where would you recommend someone to go?
I love to tell people when they visit here where to, where I love to help them figure out an itinerary. And I had friends a few years ago, they visited, the main reason they wanted to come out was to go to a Galaxy game in Carson, because they're big soccer fans and they're friends with the mascot.
Friends with the mascot?
So
love
I
it.
said, well then, to me, the worst thing you could do is get a hotel downtown and then try to go to Universal City Walk and then try to go to Disneyland and then try to go to the beach and then try to, like, you're just guaranteeing a horrible trip if you the Hollywood sign, the Walk of Fame. If you try to see all the tourist traps and drive everywhere, I was like, no, your goal is to not get a car, and it's to be in the South Bay. And we pretty much stuck to the South Bay. We went to the marine mammal rescue, and the kids loved that. I was like, this is better than going to driving to a zoo. I mean, if you stayed by the zoo, yeah, maybe go to a zoo, but and we went to a Civil War barracks museum that was closed when we went there, but then there was someone at the place, and he asked where they were from, and we said Minnesota, so he was like, oh, just walk, let me know when you leave, and like open it up for us. And we went to Sunken City, and I mean, there's so much stuff to do in any part of the metropolis that I just like, if you, it kind of depends on what the person wants to see. If you want to see Hollywood stuff, then okay, go see your Hollywood stuff, but stay in Hollywood. Like, don't, and be prepared to be disappointed.
No, I feel sorry for here at the library downtown when I see people and they've been staying in hotels around there. You see them on the streets, and I feel kind of bad for them, because I'm thinking, there is a lot of stuff downtown, but you really have to dig it up, and you have to kind of either be a history nerd or a architecture, right? Exactly. And then it's so far to anything else, even if you did just want to hit the tourist thing. So then you want to.
Right.
Anyway, so I feel bad. I feel like it's a hard place to visit.
Well, that same
strangely, even though it's such a popular destination.
We did do a downtown day, and I remember we went to the Broad, and the kids were like, well, I remember one of them said, like, we have Jeff Koons at our museum too. Like, they were so not, but they loved Angel's Flight. They were
Oh
like,
my
They were like,
God.
we can walk, and take pictures of ourselves. Yeah, knock yourselves out on the.
I know that
trail.
little thing.
And then we went to Grand Central Market, and someone had ordered 2 beers, but they gave him 4. So he was like, "Do you guys want some beer?" And like, it just felt like the red carpet was being rolled out for them. I was like, I hope you guys are appreciating like how all the fun little things that you weren't planning on doing. Like the Broad was the thing you were like, we have to do this, but then it's all the other things that
Right.
if you open yourself up to that.
Yeah, so. Just one other question. I saw you commented on the Los Angeles Times ran its
Mapping
100 and how many essential
the
book
essential
lists?
books, yes. Yeah.
What is it? 115,
I don't remember. Was it 101?
101
Maybe?
essential LA books, and you went through and said that you had read 7.
Yeah, I know. Not
Which
that
goes sort of to the, arbitrary. I don't know whether it's supposed to make you feel bad or
Right.
encourage you to read the books. But on that note, which LA books would you recommend? Do you love?
Well, like I said, Holy Land. I love Four Ecologies.
Yeah, that's by Reno Bonham.
Yes. Right now, I'm reading Silver Lake Bohemia from Vincent Brooke and Michael Locke, and that's enjoyable because I live in Silver Lake.
I was going to say that's
so
your neck of the woods.
It's funny to read something that the information has kind of come through one source and then come to you and then say like, oh, they're kind of, I don't know. It felt like echoes of what I'm writing, even though it was written before. Because it's like, oh, this probably got adapted to a Wikipedia article, which made itself, way to this. And
Because I find that, and I'm struggling with a patron question I'm working on right now, but you find that so often in history that when you're researching something and you keep reading the same thing over and over, and then sometimes it's not even true, but
Right, it's repeated anyway.
it was everyone cites, one person cited that 1926 article, so then
Right.
so then the next people look and they, 2 people said that,
Yeah.
3 people said that, and nobody went back to actually verify
right.
that. And so anyway,
That's funny.
you find that in history a lot.
I live in. I mean, the area of Silver Lake that I live in was Ivanhoe, and if you read the Wikipedia article or anything else that you find online about Ivanhoe, they all say
Hugo Reed
moved here from a different part of northern Mexico because this was still Mexico when he moved here, and he was struck by how. I told a friend from Scotland this, and he laughed. I was like, he was struck by how much this looked like the
Yes,
Scottish
that's how he
Highlands, which he'd presumably never even saw since he moved to Mexico really young and was from Glasgow or Edinburgh or something. He wasn't from the Highlands. And then I was like, and so he named it Ivanhoe, which takes place in the Lake District because it's written by a Scottish author. And I was like, none of this makes any sense. It doesn't look like Scotland. It doesn't look any more like Scotland than any other part of northern Mexico for sure. And then he didn't even live in that area. He lived over by Santa Anita, so why would he be naming an area that he didn't even live in? All that stuff, I was like, there's no record of any of this until William Mulholland and them started developing that area and said, oh yeah, this is the history of this area. There used to be a village here that had a Scottish name when it was Mexico. And I was like, okay, so this is all like real estate. That's
the history of
a more
LA.
interesting story, really.
Right.
Less complicated.
That's funny. All right. Well, I think that's the end of our conversation. I just want to thank you again for coming.
Thank you.
And I'm sure your maps and also your writings, which can be found on ericbrightwell.com, will inspire people to go out and explore their neighborhood and all of
And maybe
Los
draw your own
Angeles.
maps and submit them to
That's
me.
right.
I'd love to see other people's maps. Of
That's right.
their
And make their own.
neighborhood borders.
Yes, personal maps.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm actually going to be doing, like, a friend asked me to go with her son on a walk while she's in a class. And so that was my idea was, he's in elementary school. I'm going to say, like, why don't you do a map with with me while we walk around this neighborhood? And you can include what you think is important or...
I actually did a program a while back. Not very many people came, but it was part of the Grand Avenue Arts. But it was kind of like, oh, just draw a map. From memory, it can be your neighborhood now, your neighborhood when you grew up, and what you, same thing. It's like what you include is what, anyway. But
Yeah.
I think, yeah, much fun. All right. Thank you again, and until next time.
Thank you.